Hey there, Streakers. How are you doing today? I am without my lovely host, Jamie. She is off and away at Education Week, learning everything that she can learn. And then she'll be back with great wisdom next week. Today, I have a special guest. He's been with us for quite some time. He is our Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Operations Officer, Chief Design Officer, and whatever Chief Officer he wants to be, he is, because he is the mastermind behind the Streakin app, the designer, and he works closely with our developers. I wanted to have him on our Streakin podcast today to talk about his streaking journey and everything that he is. So let's welcome, without further ado, Mr. Talan David to the Streakin Show, and let's start streaking. What is streaking and why should you do it?
Streaking is how you set up personal winning streaks. Look at who you want to be and what you need to do to become that person. This is Streaking.
I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jamie.
And we are streakers. Through 30 years of marriage and 7 children, we have learned the power of consecutive consistency or streaking.
To start streaking is simple. You just follow these 3 laws. Make it laughably simple, keep a record, and join the streaking community.
Streaking is your hidden superpower. With it, you will consistently progress and grow in whatever area of life you want.
In this podcast, Jeff and I will share all the fun, exciting, serious, solemn, wonderful parts of family, spiritual, professional, and personal life, and how streaking powers it all.
So join us in the conversation, join the movement, and start streaking today. Talan, it is good to have you on. It's been a little while.
Jeff, it's been a second since I've done one of these great podcasts, and I do miss talking with Jamie too. I'll settle for you for now, but
all right, I appreciate that. Yeah, I know I'm the second best on this, but I appreciate everyone having a little bit of grace and and talking to me.
Yeah, of course.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, so Tal and I, we were just chatting about what would be of value for all of you, all the streakers out there, and anyone that's listening to the podcast for the first time, and we thought that it would be cool to talk about Talan's journey through streaking and how that journey has led up to everything that he's designed to put into the Streakin app. So, and this started, what was it, Talan, about 3 years ago that we met?
3 years ago.
Yeah, so he and I sat down. Well, Jamie and I and Talan, we were sitting down, and if you go back several podcasts, you can hear. We won't reiterate the entire story, but we were at a wedding reception, friend's wedding reception. Talan was actually the photographer, videographer, and doing everything there. And we sat down, and he asked us, "So, what are you guys doing?" And we said, "Streaking." And as everyone does when they first hear it, they're like, "Huh, never pictured you two as streakers."
Yeah, it's like there's got to be something more to what you're saying here, or maybe I misheard you. You didn't misspeak. You've been streaking, and so you told me about the book you were writing, and this was before the book was even published.
Yeah,
this
it was
was
still a
before
manuscript.
the app was even really an idea. So it was the early stages, and you told me about streaking. I left, and I couldn't stop thinking about what you told me, and so I was hooked.
So your streaking journey began right there, as far as that's concerned. Now, through the last 3 years, I mean, there has been a lot of progression. What I was thinking is start just from that moment to, and this may be a little bit of a conversation, but from that moment to today, walk through a little bit about your journey and some of the things that you've learned. And then after that, and I'll probably ask you a couple of questions in there, but then after that, we'll talk about how that journey has gone into the design of the Streakin app.
Yeah, so from that conversation, I was working for a company as a videographer in St. George, Utah, and I wanted to be working for Streakin. And so at that time, I was like, okay, Jeff, any part that I could have in this, I want in. And I've noticed along this progression from where we were 3 years ago, before the app, before the book, to where we are now, you have to have some sort of delusion into what is possible. You have to be a little bit delusional because you don't understand how hard and how much work. You just kind of in that moment think, this is what we're going to do. And it's going to be, it won't be that bad. And you have to have some sort of that confidence that I think entrepreneurs need to move forward into the unknown. Mm-hmm. And so looking from where we were then to where we are now, I couldn't have even dreamed that this is where we'd be at. And so that's something that I think about in my own streaks is you have to have kind of this almost self-confidence to start in the beginning and not know where it's going to take you. And it will progress on its own as you keep your streak alive or as you keep moving forward in a certain direction. So yeah, we Jeff brought me on to do marketing and then pivot to now being over product and design. And that's something I couldn't have anticipated.
Yeah. So question I have for you, what do you feel was missing in your life that you were attracted to streaking? What was it that said, you know what, there was some itch that streaking scratched? What was that as you look back now? I mean, because it's been a while. I mean, some of your streaks are 3 years old, that your oldest
some are over 1,100 days, 1,200 days.
I mean, so they're fantastic. So there was something that you had a little bit of an itch, and this scratched it. What was it now that you look back?
So looking back, what it was is hearing you and Jamie talk about, you knew exactly how long you've been doing something that you've always wanted to do. And to me, that was interesting. I've never thought about the challenge of how long can I do something in a row. I've always thought about, the short-term goal. For instance, I've told the story on another podcast, but I ran a marathon. I trained for it in 3 weeks, and then I didn't run for 6 to 7 months after that because it was just this push and then fall back. And that was kind of how I've done things in life, is a push and fall back, push, fall back because of burnout.
Right.
And so I liked the idea of keeping something alive for an extended period of time and something that was sustainable. So it kind of was this itch of oh, this is that for me. I'm going to try keeping a streak alive.
And you're joined by really thousands of other people. To date, we have now, we just surpassed 13,000 registered users on the Streaking app, which is fantastic. And that's, by the way, that's 6 months of growth, really.
Yeah.
Everything before that was, beta testing. But in 6 months, we've gone from pretty much zero to over 13,000 people that are registered on the app. So they all have that itch as well. There's something about that itch that they have as well.
Well, it's because it's not out there. You see other apps starting to implement streaks and other companies starting to use it. A lot of people are familiar with Snapchat, which is, people would say, is where the original streak in mainstream culture started, is sending a Snapchat to your friends. The next is Duolingo. Now I'm starting to see it in apps where I wouldn't expect to see it. There's a scripture reading app that I use that has implemented streak counting. And so what people are starting to find is that this actually works. Now, what happens if the app can't track something that, the app doesn't know whether or not you did a certain activity? For instance, if I read, I actually like paper books. And so it doesn't know if I read. I can't have an app track that. I like having this all in one place for me now. So it's served this selfish purpose of designing this app of, this is what I need. I hope other people need this as well. This is what will work.
Well, that's that is, I think you're in good stead there, because Steve Jobs, he often said the same thing. We design stuff that we like to use. And that is exactly what you're doing, is you're designing what you want to use and how you want to use it.
Yeah, exactly. And so when looking at what's coming next for the app, I'm excited for people because it's only getting better and better. I thought the first edition of the hexagons, if you've been here long enough, was it. And this is the best.
Hexagon. Woo!
Yeah, you've been here for a while. And if you don't know what hexagons are, you're okay.
You're okay. Yeah, if you did not see that version of the app. Let's go. Let's walk a little bit further in your streaking journey, though. So through time, you've added streaks, but you started just like we recommend everyone, is you went full on methodology and said, I'm going to start with 1 or 2.
Yep.
And what I want you to do is talk about how you took that and now how you're really looking to design the app in order to support that methodology and what it is that we do there.
Yeah. So when I was introduced to streaking, the book was in its manuscript phase, and you sent me a PDF file. So I first read the book.
It was so bad. It was so bad back then.
I didn't think so. I loved it. I sped through that book.
Thanks.
Because it was new. It was something I was like, oh, this is really clear. It broke it down exactly for what I needed. But I started as directed in the book, I started with 1 streak to do it for 100 days. And the reason thinking behind that is because most people, if you were to go to a gym and lift heavy, you will hurt yourself. And the same thing with being, consistent. Most people are chronically inconsistent.
Yeah,
it's the truth. And so if you start with too much, too fast, you'll fail, and then you'll blame yourself or you'll blame streaking. And so I started off with your direction to do 1 streak first for 100 days. As soon as I hit day 100, I added 3 more. I was hooked. I was like, okay, I can do this.
I've got this.
I can do this. Because I was thinking, I was like, I want to be in these areas I also want to improve. And so in part of the methodology, that's something that we want to design into the app. We want to help people slow down, and we want to help people. And even though the motivation is there, even if they haven't read the book, we want people to slow down, start with 1 to 3 streaks. And if they want to progress further than that, if they feel confident, they can. But that's something that we want to implement into the app so people can be successful from the start. Or if they feel like they can unlock it.
Right, right. You know, as you have, or I'm going to stick on your streaks for just a second, and then we'll go more into how you use them to design the app. Was there a certain, like, you know, we talk about your spiritual life, physical life, your intellectual life, emotional life, social life. Was there any specific order to which you started to do your streaks, or was it just kind of, you know what, this is the next biggest need that I have?
I was actually thinking about this last night because I'm contemplating a new streak, and I've deleted and retired a few of them that have served their purpose for me. So I approach streaking from what do I need at this moment in my life. And there are some things that are base that I will not give up on. I will never retire. One of them is my reading streak. It's my favorite. I love my reading streak. Other ones have to do with my spirituality. I want to keep those. But there are some that are more aimed with the time of my life. And so when looking at the streak that you start next, it could either be a foundational one or it can be a time of life streak. So wherever you are at this moment, what do I need and what do I want to keep a streak alive in? That's how I'm approaching it. So now that I have kind of the base ones for me, it's hard to think if another base one will come into it. But I do feel like time of life streaks now are something that I've kind of moved closer to as I've had my foundation set and built.
So I'm looking at in the app, and it's great because I get to use all of Talan's fantastic designs, and it's so much fun. So I'm looking in the app under, let's see here, you said read, let's see here, read at least, where's it at? Best, open, do, take, make. Oh, read every day. 1,140 days. That's where it's at. So 1,140 days, which, let's see here, 369. That's closer to 4 years now, actually, than it is 3. That's amazing.
So looking at that streak was originally read at least one paragraph from a nonfiction book. And then you introduced me to a fiction series. And I'm like, I want to read. I don't want to limit it to just nonfiction. And so it's fun to see the progression over time of, as long as I read every day, that to me is a success, and I can learn things even from fiction, which I wouldn't have really explored. I'm one of those people where I feel like if I'm reading, if I felt that is if I was reading fiction, it's the same as watching TV, which, reading's better than TV. But
yeah. And you and I have gone into in the past in a couple of different podcasts, broad streaks versus narrow streaks and all of that, which is part of your streaking journey as well, because as you've looked at streaking as a tool for you in your life, and I love the way that you put it, time of life streaks. In fact, that's probably something we ought to look at in regards to talking about and researching is time of life streaks. When you're a teenager, or when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, when you're in college, when you're just starting out, in your career, when you're just starting out in married life or family life. I'll bet there's streaks that are time of life streaks, and then there's lifetime streaks. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just exploring that right now. I mean, you just
lifetime streaks and time
that.
of life. No, I really like that idea. The one that I'm thinking about right now is a time of life streak, and it's the draft of this streak is to do at least one thing for my portfolio every day. Ooh. So because I do design, one thing that happens is you want to update your portfolio. But what happens is you don't do it for extended periods of time, and then you're left with nothing, and then you have to do it all at once. I want to kind of chuck away at it over time rather than do it all at once, which is what I usually do, cram and procrastinate. So
that's really
is to do
really
something
good
for my portfolio every day.
Yeah, that is quite a fascinating streak to think about, because you're right. And you could apply it to so many other things, because you, as a designer, you want it as your portfolio. Anyone that's a business professional or a professional in any field could say, update my resume at least one time a week, one time a month, or review or look at my resume at least one time a month. And then as you look at it, that can be the opportunity to update it and to add any accolades, any achievements, any accomplishments. And one of the things that we love is any streaks, that looking at it and saying, these are the streaks that I currently have. And if you're updating those on your resume as well.
Where this came from is I have a streak to open or make a recording in my journal app. And what I've noticed is there are some days when it's late at night and I don't make a recording, but I open the app so I keep the streak alive. I always want to be reminded that this is important to me. You may think that's silly, but it's worked, and I've kept it alive for almost 2 years. Yeah, almost 2 years.
On that one is that
509 days.
509 days. Yep.
And so what I found though is the days that I make a recording, I go into more detail than the days of when I'm trying to retroactively make a recording for something that happened 4 or 5 days ago. I don't have as much detail. I just remember, basic, simple things, but I really enjoy listening back because I've done it more than a year. I have now what you did last year. So I can listen back to what I did last year, and it's really fun to hear the details of the things that I would have forgotten. So
wow,
as I'm thinking about
that is really cool.
And looking at my portfolio, or you're talking about your resume, you will forget the things that you need to make your resume or your portfolio pop over time. So if you keep up with it and you do it on a daily basis, just a small amount, you'll have a better portfolio than trying to retroactively remember all of the accomplishments, all of the things that you've done, all the designs, and the reason behind them. So it was this cool thing of how my streak lent to how I'm going to start the next one.
Yeah, that is really cool. I love that. As you were talking, I was thinking about so with the Streaking podcast, this has been going on now for 2.5, almost 3 years as far as the Streaking podcast. And Jamie and I have done it on a weekly basis for most of that time. Recently, we've made some format changes, and I've been doing it on a daily basis. And I've wanted to do that for a while. I love the podcast format. I enjoy the opportunity I have to express thoughts, feelings. I don't do as well, interestingly enough, with a journal or with speaking in a journal or even writing in a journal. I actually had a journal writing streak that it was write at least one sentence in my journal every day. And I did that for probably 270, 280 days. And I was just like, I don't like this at all.
Like,
Zero.
Not a fan.
No, I am not a fan. It wasn't working for me.
Yeah.
So I retired. Well, I'll tell you what happened just in my streaking journey. I broke that streak, and after I broke it, I was kind of feeling like, I should do it again. Everyone says you should write in a journal. I should do it again. So I started the streak again, and then 70 days later, I broke it again, and I'm like, you know what? Obviously, I don't care enough about this to keep this streak alive. Therefore, I'm going to retire it completely. What I did find, though, is that I really enjoy writing letters, and I have a letter writing streak, and I enjoy this format of podcasting. I enjoy interacting with people. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to go into that as my streak. Now, I have not actually made the podcast an actual streak yet. I hesitate on it. I need to get because there's a few dependencies, and those dependencies stop me from making it a streak. But I am very aware I'm more consistent than I ever have been with it, because I'm getting to that place where I want to start it as a streak. And once I know, and this is the other thing I wanted to ask you, and I found that as I've built my consecutive muscle, that when I know I want to start something as a streak, I know I'm going to keep it alive. So it does two things. One, I'm hesitant to start it. And two, when I do start it, there's no stopping it. I mean, it's like, this is the streak I'm going to go after.
No, I felt the same. The decision is the hardest part. Now, I want to ask a question about the decision to start a streak for a podcast. This is something I think a lot of people struggle with, is the anticipation of starting something and not knowing that this is going to be going for a long time. So my question to you is, what dependencies is that something that you need a streak around, or is it fine being as it is without a streak? Are there things that you feel like don't need a streak, and there are things that do need a streak, and is there a difference?
I have found that, and this is a great question, yes, there are things that don't need a streak for me. For example, and I'll go to spiritual life for just a second. Going to church every Sunday, I don't need that as a streak. I do it. It's not something that I need to be compelled to do. However, staying in spiritual life, reading at least a verse of scripture every day, I need that as a streak. For any number of reasons, I need to have that as a streak. Now, on this side of it, on the podcast side. So looking at my life as far as why would I need a streak for something like podcasting? And because here's what I found, and the nuances of this are quite interesting. I have found that with some of these things, like for example, podcasting, it's not necessary for me to maintain in my life. It's not a necessary thing. It's more, I want to do it. And if I have a day that is just not the day that in fact, I recorded a podcast just 3 days ago on my blah day. I was like, I had no motivation. I found inspiring things, but I had no motivation whatsoever. There was one thing that kept the podcast alive, was the anticipation of starting a streak on it. I'm like, can I really do it? And I recorded a podcast. Now, you asked another thing as far as dependencies. I know, and you and I were talking just before we got on the podcast about mics for your iPhone, because I like to have a certain sound quality for our podcasts. And so I don't want to record it just on my phone without having a little bit more of a mic that will pick up more directionally. And so that's a dependency right now that I just don't have that technology yet. Yeah. When I get it, now I've removed all of the obstacles that I can see, because I can I can record the podcast anywhere on my phone. And the only last little dependency is I want to make sure I can post from my phone, which I haven't done yet. It's a little bit easier. I use Libsyn, which is that's where the Streaking podcast is hosted by Libsyn, which is a podcast host network. And I just need to make sure I've got all the necessary things to be able to post that podcast. So
okay. So my next question then to follow this up is, do you feel like streakers sometimes don't make streaks or don't start streaks because they don't do them to the level that they want to? So we've talked about laughably simple. We did a little bit of a study and got some data from the streaks that are kept alive versus those that are not kept alive. We noticed that most streaks are started in the physical realm. That's where most people have their first streak. What we found, though, is it has one of the lowest percentages of alive versus broken. And
isn't that interesting? I think we need to pause right there on that for just a second. If you're listening to this, physical streaks are what start the most. However, they are also the ones that are the least in regards to keeping the streak alive.
Yeah, so more people have them broken than alive. And I was looking and trying to form a hypothesis, because that's what I do is I look at data, I form a hypothesis on how do we improve design. And so the hypothesis is that people start streaks that are too hard and they can't keep them alive. And because they don't want to make it easier, because it doesn't satisfy them in their heart of what they know that they are capable of doing. And so I wanted to ask that question to you, Jeff. Is this something where you're trying to challenge yourself to do it every day, or would you be okay making this a weekly streak to
That's
have
a
it
good
as a
question.
streak?
Yeah, this one on the podcast is a daily. I want it to be every single day, and I have looked at it as far as being a weekly streak, being doing 5 days a week or something like that. And I've always had in my heart this desire to do a daily podcast for a lot of reasons. And so as I looked at that, so then the question is for me, and this is where I think it's important, what is laughably simple for me? Now, I know myself over 8 years of streaking, what's laughably simple. And I know that I can set something like, for example, doing a daily podcast that may be ridiculously hard for someone else because either they haven't built up their consecutive muscle or they've had other things get in the way. Now, the question that you ask, I think, is a critical one for all of us, which is, how do you determine what's your laughably simple? Because the idea is keeping the streak alive. And that is so critical. I don't know how to emphasize more this idea of the importance of keeping the streak alive over the activity or the difficulty of the activity. So, for example, you said, and I've seen, and we've both seen together, this whole physical realm of streaks and how people will set them and they'll break them right away because it's like 100 push-ups a day. I mean, that's where they start, 100 push-ups a day. I don't know where they're coming from, but I'll tell you this, most of the time, if they're saying 100 push-ups a day, I can lay money down that streak will be done within probably 3 days, at the longest 6 days. Not because they couldn't do the push-ups. See, that's the thing about it, is people think, well, they're just not strong enough to do the push-ups. That's not true. A lot of times it's because they haven't built the consecutive muscle, which is the muscle that says, I'm going to do this no matter what. I'm going to keep this streak alive no matter what. So rather than starting with 100, start with 1 push-up every day and make the focus the idea of keeping it alive, keep that whole streak alive. There's the 2 muscles that are at work there. So to your point, I think that, yes, many people start with too hard of a streak. In fact, I think that Jamie and I, when we first started streaking with the run, we stumbled onto Laughably Simple. We didn't realize, because if you look at anything else, it's like, well, if you don't do it, if you're not doing 100 push-ups a day, you're never ever going to get the progress that you want. Well, I'll tell you this, if you do 100 push-ups for 3 days in a row and then don't do them again, you'll never get the progress that you want.
Yeah.
It's just guaranteed. But I'll promise you this too, if you do 1 push-up a day, at least 1, and you keep that going, you will absolutely get the progress that you want.
So my mind is churning right now. And the reason why is because there's a feature I've been working on. And I don't know if we'll reveal this, but it goes in line with what we're talking about. So we've talked about today lifetime streaks,
right?
Time of life streaks. Lifetime streaks for me are the ones that have to be laughably simple.
That's really true. That's a great point. Yeah, lifetime streaks have to be laughably simple,
because it's something that you are incorporating into your life every day, and life gets busy. Life gets challenging, and there are days where you don't want to do it, your blah days. My read every day is a lifetime streak. It's simple. I have other streaks that are lifetime streaks that are simple. However, there's this need for us to challenge ourselves sometimes, to grow. And we don't necessarily see that as a lifetime streak, but we want to grow in a certain area and prove to ourselves something. And that's where we look at challenge, being challenged. And I think there's room for both. And it's about being consistent in 2 different ways. One is consistent in an area that you want, a part of you and who you are. And another is to prove to yourself in a certain area that you can be consistent in a difficult thing. And it's important to have both. Now, I recommend first starting off with something that is a lifetime streak. Get used to doing something frequently. And when I look at you, Jeff, you've been streaking for 7-8 years now. You're able to do challenging streaks because you have the foundation of a lifetime streak behind you.
That's really good. Yeah.
And people who go straight into challenging things without doing the work to develop that consecutive muscle, they fail more often. And that's the only thing that they're used to, is challenging themselves rather than building up the ability to challenge themselves.
Wow. My mind is just exploding right now. So what you're talking about, and we'll just reveal it to everyone, is we're going to be introducing challenge streaks into the app. Now, this won't be for a little while, but what you talk about, Talan, and this is in design. So now, how do we help people not hurt themselves, right? Because if you enter into a challenge streak right away, and let's say it is one of those challenge streaks that's, let's call it read 100 pages every day. I mean, just something ridiculously hard.
The challenge will end very soon. That's the fun. Because again, with this idea, the design is there's 2 different challenge streaks you could have. One is a last one standing.
Yeah.
So everyone competes until there's one person.
Yep. Or
it's a type of goal. So you set a limit saying we're going to do this for 30 days. Anyone who reaches this for 30 days wins the challenge.
That is... And looking at it and saying, if you have the base of a lifetime streak that you've been working on for quite some time, so going back to our streaking journey, meaning yours, mine, as we look at it, You're right. We really did start with lifetime streaks. And those lifetime streaks, keeping those alive for a certain, gave us the strength then to look at some of the more challenging streaks. Like, for example, I look at one of your streaks, the coding streak that you had. That was a little more challenging. That was not, if you were to start with that one, your confidence in streaking would probably have gone down. That would be my guess.
Yes. However, my streak was very simple.
Yeah.
It was to open up like a coding app.
Open the coding app. Yeah.
To keep alive. I didn't enjoy coding, and I found that out after day 120.
Yeah.
And similar to how you didn't like journaling, I wouldn't have found this information, but I wouldn't have blamed streaking because I kept it alive. I was successful in doing something for 120 days.
Yeah.
Most people right now think of the short term and the thrill of a challenge. And so I kind of want to push against that, and where both of us found our success in the streaks that have brought us the lifetime streaks, the things that we don't want to give up on. Most people think short term. And the reason that is because to do the long term streaks, I first read the book. I did all the activities and saying, who do you want to be? What actions does that person do? And I was able to find that. It takes a little bit more searching to find the lifetime streaks of what you're wanting to do for an extended period of time versus the challenge.
That's a really good insight, Talan. And what I'm thinking about the second edition of the book, and we've been in process, or I've been in process of just drafting the manuscript, which is when you're drafting a manuscript and writing a book, I'm envisioning it's a lot like design when you're designing the app. There's a lot of stuff that you consider that will probably never be used, but it's critical in building up the manuscript. And this, I think, is a critical piece of it as far as lifetime versus time of life versus challenge. Because I think that I think those are three different categories of streaks. Because you've got the lifetime streak, which is something that from the moment I started, I never plan on ever having it go away. And then
it could be something that you're testing, and then through keeping the streak alive, you determine this is something I want to do for the rest of my life.
True, absolutely. And then you've got the time of life streak, which, for example, one of the time of life streaks that's coming to an end at our house is we have Chance, who is 11. He's our last child. Jamie, we really have more of a family streak, but it's Jamie's streak that she keeps alive of reading to the children at least one time every day, 5 sentences. Well, that time of life is quickly coming to an end, and that streak will probably end. And it will be retired, and it will have served its purpose. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. But as you think about that, so that's a time of life. And then there's the challenge streaks where I need the consistency or the consecutiveness of a streak to that challenge to really move me in a particular period of time, be that 90 days, 100 days, 180 days, whatever it is. That challenge streak now takes me to maybe a new level, and that may be a little bit more difficult than what my laughably simple is for a lifetime or a time of life streak.
And I see your podcast streak as a challenge streak. You're challenging yourself. It's not something that is, you have to make way for all these things so that it can be doable, and it's a challenge for you to keep it alive. Where other ones are just a little bit more simple, and we make them that way so you can do it forever.
That's a really good point. Yeah,
and I don't anticipate some of my streaks being forever ones, but I have them because they serve the purpose for right now. So if you're listening to this, streakers, and you're having a hard time deciding what streak to start next because you're worried of that fear of how long am I going to, don't worry about it. This could be a time of life streak.
Yeah.
Just get started. And we spend so much time beforehand thinking about the perfect streak. You'll refine it as you go, and you'll learn more as you go. And that's this theme for today for me is in the app is you learn as you go. You will never learn unless you start writing the book. You'll never learn unless you start the design of the app. You'll never learn unless you start the streak. The key is the starting, and it's oftentimes the most hard part.
So as you think about that, so now the question I have for you, so we happen on these concepts and these ideas and these thoughts. How do you take that from this conceptual to actual tactical in the app? Because that's what we have to do is we have to go from the concept to the actual application and say, okay, how do we translate now lifetime, time of life, challenge streaks into the app to help people along this road?
So my favorite format for figuring out difficult scenarios within app design is questions. So next to my design, I use the application called Figma. I have a little sticky notepad where I write down all the questions that I have, because I don't know the answer to yet, and I have to be okay with that. And so all of these questions by the end of this design should be answered. And then what always happens is as I start designing, more questions go to the question tab. But I would have never found those questions had I started. So the work is to start by answering, just try to answer a question from what you've asked. So one of the things with challenge streaks, some of the questions that I have is, how is somebody notified that they've been invited to a challenge? How are they notified when somebody wins the challenge? What happens when the challenge ends? What are the different methods that people can find public challenges? So I have all of these questions that have to be answered before the end of the design, but I take time in making sure I answer each one, and it helps clarify my mind. Now, there are iterations after iterations after iterations, but it also comes down to my knowledge of, okay, here's the question now. What's the best way to implement this? One of my streaks is to learn or practice at least one digital marketing principle. I'm planning on pivoting this.
I was going to say, this one? I think you'll pivot because you started that way because you thought you were going to start in marketing, and now you're in design quite heavily.
Yeah, and interesting. Design and marketing have played an interesting role because you're trying to influence decisions in the best way possible inside of an app. That's marketing is trying to influence decisions with certain media, messaging, copy. Design is trying to influence decisions within visual design and in the application and web apps. So for me, it's kind of taken what I've learned, and I've now formed this passion behind design. And so now this streak is forming into learn at least one thing about product design and strategy every day. So they kind of go together. So I'm trying to find the words so I can keep the streak because it's having to do with my professional.
Instead of retiring one, instead of just retiring it and starting over with
feeds into the same thing. And so I want to say, like, maybe it's learn something about what I do for my profession every day. Make it broad so I can count.
Make it a little bit more broad, so that you have that opportunity to keep that streak alive. Because there is something real about keeping the streak alive. I mean,
and it's not about the number for me.
No.
What it's about for me is showing that I've been intentional in an area of my life. And it would be a disservice to just start from zero because all of the things I did for the past, now that one is, I'm looking here.
What's that in the 500?
No, that's 1,131 days.
Oh yeah, 1,131. Yeah.
I've done something every day for digital marketing, and I still have, because I read certain articles about digital marketing every day. But I don't want to dismiss that, and I want to keep that going as part of my career because that's part of my career growth. So
you probably could do it where you just say learn or practice at least one digital principle if you want to do that. I mean, that's it. Yeah, but I like what you're thinking too, is learn or practice at least one principle for my profession could be it as well, where you're a little bit more broad because that keeps it as a lifetime streak and moving it forward.
Because there may be something in the future where I'm no longer a product designer and I need other skills. I will still use this streak to learn those skills rather than starting another one and another one. It's just something that is lifetime for me. So it needs to be more broad. Good.
Yeah, that's really good insight. I think that in considering that, I think of, Professor Danny Weathers, we had him on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the study that he's done on activity streaks. And one of the things that he said was that the user, the person, defines the streak. And I think, I wanted to get your thoughts on this as well. So many apps, as you mentioned, are using streaks because there's something real, like Snapchat, to keep a streak alive, that causes people to use the Snapchat app. And so they're using it in a way to get you to be able to use their application or use their service or use what it is. That's some gamification inside of each of us that says, well, I want to keep this streak alive. Now, what Professor Weathers found in his research is that people actually want to define their own streak, and that apps that put a streak in are limiting in the sense that they define the streak for you. Whereas what we're talking about right now is someone's not defining your streak for you.
No.
You're looking at it and saying, this is my streak. I get to define it. I get to look at it and decide what it is I'm going to do, how I may change or modify this streak to keep it alive, to keep it within, because you set up the parameters. You set up what it is that the rules for keeping the streak alive. And one of the things that Professor Weathers said is that is critical to streaking success is that people get to set up their own, because they'll get frustrated. I know that there's a couple of apps that Jamie uses that have streaks on them. And
I'm one of them. I get frustrated because they end at midnight, and I keep my streaks live. My reset time's at 3 a.m. because I go to bed way later.
Yeah.
And so I have a more accurate account in the streaking app because I am the one deciding. And now this goes back to Chris Dancy. You've done a podcast with Chris Dancy, who is the most connected man in the world. That's kind of his title. And he often says, you don't work for technology, make technology work for you. And that's what this is when I go into apps that decide the streak that I have to do to keep it alive, that to me doesn't fit what I need in my time of life or what in my lifetime streak. What I really like is we've designed something where people can customize everything about who the person they want to become. And they are the ones that decide. We've talked about introducing, API calls where, there's certain activities that your phone may recognize and it marks your streak automatically for you. At this moment, I'm really against it. I like the idea of being intentional and deciding this, yes, I did this today. Because if you didn't know that you completed it and your phone did it for you, it doesn't give the same satisfaction of choosing that I did this today.
Yeah. As you talk about that, I'm thinking about Duolingo, because that's the other really prominent streak that's out there. And if you're in the streaking app, and this is for you streakers out there, if you're in the streaking app, so Talan has designed it in a way that you can post in the feed your proof that you've completed the streak for today, which, by the way, that's going to get a major upgrade as well. We're excited about that.
So excited for it. There's so much. I'm so excited for everyone listening. If you listen to this podcast, there's a reason to listen to this, is because you get the insider knowledge of what's coming.
That's right. So in the social media feed, though, what I've found surprising is how many people post screenshots of other apps. Yep. And I was thinking about this, and I'm asking myself the question, why? What is it about having a screenshot from another app in the streaking app? Why is it that they need it? Now, one is I want to post proof, and I understand that. However, it literally has on there the streaking. It says, what is it? It's like,
so I'll walk people through, because I have a Duolingo streak.
Yeah,
I have a Duolingo streak to practice Italian every day. And so what happens is you keep the streak alive. You have to complete a lesson for your streak to live on. It tells you your streak. Now, what people are doing is they do their Duolingo lesson. They complete their streak in the app in Duolingo, but then they're coming into the streaking app to mark that they did it and then post a screenshot that they kept their streak alive. And the question is, why are people deciding to take a screenshot of a different app where the streak is already kept alive in there and bring it to the streaking app to post proof? And that's the question of that there's a need for people to share with others in a community setting, even if your streak is on a different app, which was really exciting for us to see.
It really is. Because you think about the extra effort that takes. I got to take a screenshot. It's saved into my photos. I got to go into the streaking app. I got to mark my streak. I got to post proof. And then when I post that proof, I'm going to post the proof of the screenshot that I just took.
So when you look at the effort is always given when there is a reward that they see is greater than the effort. So it's similar with money. You pay for things. There's a reason you give money is because you believe what you're getting is worth or greater than the money you're giving. Now, with effort, it's the same thing. These people see that what they're getting from the streaking app and posting the proof is worth the effort of going from a different app screenshot to post in another app, which tells me one thing, that community is so important and people want their streak visible because they're proud of what the consistency they have going on in their life.
Yeah. It's really kind of cool to watch too. And that, which brings us to the other portion of streaking, the methodology, which is the community aspect of it, and how people really do like to share and be able to share with a broad community, a public community, but then also with their individual community. So as you've designed the app, you've also looked at that aspect of it as far as private communities versus the overall public community. And I know that there's going to be a lot more on that, but walk us through a little bit about your thought process as you think about, this conceptual idea, the questions that you ask. Mm-hmm. And by the way, and there's a couple of rabbit holes that we're going to go down here for just a second, but I wanted to go back to one thing before you answer the question that I was just about to ask you. You wrote questions down.
Yeah.
To answer those questions, you design inside of Figma to start
Yeah.
to design to answer those questions. Is that right? I mean, you're looking
Correct.
at it and you're saying, okay, this is my question. How do people get notified that there's a challenge that's available? And then you go into design and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, this is, and you do several iterations and you design it in such a way that it's like you're touching the actual app. Is that right?
Yeah. So when I answer these questions, I go into the design, and that first design is never it. But it gives me a clearer idea of what is the right design. And so you work through all these iterations until you come upon something that you like the design. Now, once designing, you then move to prototyping, which is connecting the buttons that are touchable to the screens of where they're supposed to go to. So when I send an invite, where do I get taken to after sending the invite? What is the feedback that I'm given? And so there's all these different avenues that you have to explore to make sure that the user at the end of the day is as clear and simple as possible. So if we're looking at streaking methodology that has improved my design, it's the laughably simple. If you make something too complicated, nobody will know how to use it. It's just the fact. We've gone through this so many times with the design. It's like it's not simple enough. And if it's not simple enough, then the average user won't use it correctly.
Okay.
And so that's
Go
a
ahead.
really important thing that I have to thank you for coming up with laughably simple. So it's improved my design.
Just speaking of design, so there was one iteration of the app where we had, for every streak, we had 3 circles.
And just as clarification, this was before I started doing design. This was the moment that propelled me into, okay, we have this need in our company. I will learn design, and I found that I like it. So
Talan with his disclaimer there, which I love. So we released the app. We have 3 circles, and every single one of the circles on the streak you touch, it does an action. I mean, it does something. And for us, we inside of the street, the people who were looking at the design and doing it at the time, we're like, oh, you just push this button to mark off your streak.
And the button was like the streaking icon.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't really
that
clear.
Was so cool. It was a really cutesy way of marking your streak. People didn't really understand though.
No, because so you touch that and it would make this icon appear, which you see on my shirt right now is the icon would appear, which is our streaking logo. But I was talking with someone and they're like, well, which button do you push to mark your streak? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, if I push this one, which was like longest streak or something like that, or current streak, whatever, they push it, it would open up another page that you could actually modify your streak. And then the other one would open up a page that you could actually modify your streak.
I remember you telling me of a story watching someone complete their streak. And what they did is instead of tapping the button that would do it for you, they would tap on their current streak and literally put in the next number that was in line.
Yes.
And you saw this and you're like, oh no. And I saw this and I was like, oh no. Okay, it's time to help.
So now, gratefully, it's interesting because now you have a check mark. You touch the check mark, and that marks your streak. And even that, we're trying to get even more simple. I mean, it's like to go to even more laughably simple. So there's no way that you can misunderstand how to mark your streak.
Yeah, the one thing I've had to learn as we talk about laughably simple and working through starting from nothing and going from something. That's what a streak is. You start from 0 and you go to however long you want to keep it alive. You have to be okay with the unknown. And that's something people struggle with is they don't know, is this really going to do for me what I need it to do for me? And they try to anticipate the future and read into it and say, this is the perfect streak or this isn't the perfect streak right from day 0. And it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You have to get going on the path to find if the streak is worth it in the end. And if it isn't, guess what? You learned something. And if it is, you've learned something.
And that consecutiveness has taught you what that is. Well, Streakers, it has been a great conversation today. Talan and I could keep going on and on and on about this. Talan has developed the streaking app in the sense of the design of it. He's worked with a great team of developers that put all of his design ideas into action. It's fun to see you guys interact as you design and they develop, and then you both work together. As we finish up here, one of the things, streakers, to think about is as you interact with any application, just know that there is someone like a Talan behind this that has been designing it and making it something that is absolutely phenomenal. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can at any time at Jeffrey, Jeffery, at thestreakingapp.com, or you can reach out to Talan, Talan, at thestreakingapp.com, and he will answer any of your design questions or any of your streaking questions. As we talked about here, think about those lifetime versus time of life streaks versus challenge streaks. That's something we'll get a little bit more into as we go along. If you would like, or anytime, you can download the book or order it at Amazon. And also, if you'd like, you can follow us on the Streaking app, any one of us on the Streaking app, and have your streaks tracked there and share them in the community where there's a lot of people who will want to celebrate with you. As the app continues to be designed, there are several things. I mean, we've got designs out for a year and a half that are going out there. And Talan is just absolutely fantastic at looking at what your use cases are. So if you have any suggestions for him or any feedback, you love feedback, Drew?
I love feedback. It's helped the design that I first started with. I've improved it as a designer, I'll say that. And so what's coming is because of feedback. So if you have feedback on something that you don't love or something that you would like, I'd appreciate all of it.
Yep. Fantastic. Well, streakers, we hope that you have a wonderful day. And until we talk again,
keep streaking.